Hey, this is Eric. As this is New Year's Day 2022, I want to wish all of the listeners of QSO Today a happy, healthy, and successful new year. QSO Today episode 382, Charlie Brown, NJ7V. My thanks to Icom America for sponsoring the QSO Today podcast. Welcome to the QSO Today podcast. I'm Eric Guth, amateur call sign 4Z1UG, where I demonstrate the diversity and relevance of our amateur radio hobby and its impact on society by interviewing ham radio operators, many of whom played vital roles in shaping our technology through the amateur radio hobby. And while many people might say, ham radio? Do people still do that? This podcast demonstrates through in-depth interviews just how amazing, diverse, and dynamic the amateur radio hobby continues to be. The QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo is returning on May 12th, Greenwich time, with new presentations and some very interesting ways to meet in virtual person integrated into our VFairs platform. Please stay tuned for announcements on the Expo website. In addition, my team has created some very novel ways for your club or organization to participate in the Expo, to meet old friends, and to make new ones. The pandemic has demonstrated to us that your club does not have to be defined by its locality. Contact me if you'd like more information. Charlie Brown, NJ7V, is twice a mountain goat, a title that comes from many SOTA activations. Of course, this means achievement and expertise operating portable from mountaintops across Arizona and the West. NJ7V will share his secrets to SOTA success and some ideas on how to build a local SOTA organization in this QSO Today. NJ7V, this is Eric, 4Z1UG. Are you there, Charlie?
Yeah, good morning, Eric. This is Charlie, November Juliet 7 Victor, and thanks for having me on your show.
Charlie, thanks so much for joining me on the QSO Today podcast. Can we start at the beginning of your ham radio story? When and how did it start for you?
Sure, yeah, we can start at the beginning. For me, like with most of your other guests, it starts early. I can remember my interest in radio communications starting when I was probably around 8 or so. I was raised on a rural dairy farming community by my grandparents in Star Valley, Wyoming, and that's about 70 miles south of Jackson Hole, along the Wyoming-Idaho border. And my friend Cal Neal and I spent a lot of our time playing in the open hay fields and just having fun as young kids. And this was in the 70s and 80s. And I remember one summer, my friend Cal, he had received a couple of walkie-talkies for his birthday. They had that Morse code printed on the front of them, and we spent a good summer, using those, communicating back and forth and having a good time. And we even tried to do the Morse code thing, except for we really got frustrated with each other because I know I'd send something and he'd say, "I didn't make any sense," and vice versa. It was kind of funny, but we never really did figure out the Morse code thing, but that was pretty fun. But my interest in science, and electronics and stuff like that, it continued into high school. I was asked by one of my teachers, Ted Heiner, from high school. He's a math teacher and a science teacher, to join a class. It was a class offered by a new one offered by the school by invitation only, and it was called Principles of Technology. And I remember in that class, one of the most interesting experiments that we had there was somehow they got a hold of these laser contraptions that on one end, one laser, it would send a laser and then it would receive that laser on the other. And one day and the laser would send communication. You could send voice over the laser. I didn't quite know how it worked, but we set up a bunch of mirrors and magnifying glasses. And we sent this laser beam all the way down to the end of this long hallway to near where the principal's office was, and we were able to I think at that time we were able to communicate by voice over this laser beam. It was really interesting. So I say this because I really didn't get into ham radio early on, but I think all of our life experiences can contribute to the point at which we do actually get in the hobby and help us along the way. So, throughout high school, I kind of never really did get into ham radio, but and looking back, it kind of surprises me. But I'm thinking about it. There was a really small community. There weren't a lot of ham radio people back then in Star Valley. Probably aren't many today as well. So I really just got started going in 2004 when I was trying to think about how I could be more prepared for an emergency, and started kind of doing research and came in touch with a guy I knew who was into ham radio, and asked him a bunch of questions, and he introduced me to ham radio. His name's Gary Hinton, AC7R. So that's kind of where I got started. It was he invited me to come to a local park and participate in field day. That was 2005. That field day was, and I was off to the races after that. I got my technician license right after field day, probably a couple of months after that.
Well, anybody that listens to the QSO Today podcast knows that I'm not going to let you end it right there, because then the story's over. But I think there's actually a bigger story, and so let's go back to Star Valley. I'm interested in knowing what your interests were in high school, and did that technical interest that you seem to be developing, or at least the scientific interest that you were developing, did that lead to choices in your education and career?
Yeah, it sure did. Well, so my interests primarily were around, I liked astronomy, and I was really into math, and liked physics, and also I was really interested in computers at the time. And they were just kind of emerging at that time, and I remember in high school using BASIC to program like pictures on a screen and stuff like that. That all influenced my career. I did go to college and got an undergraduate degree, but it was not in a technical field. And it was actually in recreation management and youth leadership. So I didn't really get a lot of influence as far as that goes. I guess later on, the computer science part of it kicked in, because that's what I do now. I'm what they call a business intelligence developer. I do a lot of database stuff. The school and the interest back then did influence the direction I took, but that was only after kind of going around it a roundabout way.
Now, were you a Boy Scout?
I was a Boy Scout, yes.
And so did that interest in scouting lead you to recreation management and youth leadership?
That was a big part of it, yeah. It was the Boy Scouts, and it was also the outdoors. Where I'm from is just beautiful, and everybody up that lives there really enjoys and spends a lot of time in the out of doors. And the decision I made to do recreation management and youth leadership was because of my interest in the outdoors and enjoying the outdoors, and two, it was at the time, even though I was a young person, I was in my 20s, I really felt strongly about helping youth and making sure that the next generation, was trained well and had good leadership. And so I went in for that reason, just to serve the youth and to enjoy the outdoors.
And did you get the Eagle Scout?
I did not. No, I was too rebellious to do much of that. I was a troublemaker, probably a little bit in Scouts, but so I didn't really do a lot of the advancements.
How did that play out in your career with this degree and with this expertise and interest, and the interest in the outdoors? And of course, anybody that's been to Wyoming knows that it's a beautiful state. How did that play out for you over the next, say, in your 20s?
Well, so in college, I got the degree, and then after that, and actually while working through college, I started working for youth organizations. I've actually worked for quite a number of youth organizations, the YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, even the Girl Scouts of the USA for a short time. And I was these were all kind of, most youth organizations hire part-time. So it's really hard to get a full-time job, especially if you're a younger person. So I eventually got a good full-time job as a residential treatment director at one point. I started out as a residential treatment staff member for a group home, and then I worked my way up to be a director I was in charge of two group homes, one's for young ladies and one for young men, and while I was working for that company, they decided to sell, and that moved me out here to Arizona.
How did you find the transition from rural Wyoming to Phoenix, Arizona?
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, yeah, my exposure to city, this was it. It just happened then. I mean, I was in a small town. I was, just everything was different as far as it's very rural. People just kind of know each other and are accepting. And yeah, it was a lot different coming to Phoenix.
Do you think that kids, whether they're rural or they're city kids, is there something that you've discovered in your career, like some underlying need that they all have, that they have in common, that you discovered a way to perhaps fulfill, to manage them? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think it really comes down to two things. One is trust. You have to set boundaries, and you have to stand by what you say, and you have to enforce what you say, and that builds trust. And the youth begin to know that you can be trusted to protect them as well as to defend them, and that you're fair. The other thing is just to love them, and that's probably the bigger one. They can tell. It doesn't matter whether they're the kids from the city or not. And I think just generally anybody can tell if you have genuine love for them and genuine love that you want to help them. If you're just going and collecting a paycheck, they can tell that's what you're doing. And so you really have to build a bond and care for them. And I think if you do those two things, then you can kind of overcome a lot of the trials that they face.
I'm married to a high school English teacher. She just uses English as a mechanism to teach kids about life, but it starts with loving kids first.
Absolutely does. Yep.
You have a transition in your professional life, it seems, because you're now doing something completely different. How did that happen?
Well, so like I said, I was working at the senior center for the city of Scottsdale as a recreation leader, and I still had this desire to be involved in technology and stuff like that. So I was in my job. I was seeking ways in which I could do more computer stuff, and actually, I took over kind of some of the website design and development for the senior center that they were doing one time, and I was using Front Page, and somehow I brought down the whole network for the whole city municipality by publishing a page, and I have no idea how I did that, but it started there. I just every opportunity I could get to kind of hone my computer skills, I did, and then I started applying for jobs outside of recreation. I just saw the writing on the wall. It's so hard to make a living in recreation management, and it's very rewarding, and I love it. But sometimes it's a bit challenging to pay bills with that. So I tried to make a transition over to computers and information technology, and I finally got a job working in that department. It was actually in HR. I was a support technician there, and then I moved from there into the actual IT centralized office. So that's kind of how it happened.
Do you think that clubs for youth are passé? Has our society evolved that clubbing for kids like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, things like that are no longer important social centers?
I would say that there are some challenges now that in today's age that maybe weren't there before, as far as the interest. I think clubs are still important, and there's a great social benefit from having clubs, but it just seems like youth today are less interested in clubs. You have a lot of specialized clubs in school, and there are some youth that do participate in those, but it just seems like it's not as well received as it used to be. I don't know the answer why. I just have observed that less youth are interested in clubs, and I think that they would totally benefit from joining clubs. The social aspect and the learning together is just a great way to develop your future and your skills and your career. I really do think another contributing factor, in addition to that, might be the social media aspect. I really think a lot of kids, that the need that the club met is now being met online in a lot of ways. Of course, there's negatives with that as well, but I do think that the younger generation meet online more and interact online more.
Now, it's my understanding from what you say that you're married and your wife is now a ham, so you're a ham radio family. But let's go back to when you first got your license and Gary Hinton, AC7R, helped you get that license. You say your first license was a technician class license?
Yes. So Gary, yeah, like I said, Gary invited me over to a park on a field day, and I went there and participated in field day, used his call sign to get on the air, and really enjoyed doing that. And then, after that, I asked him kind of how I could get the license. He explained that the best way to do it would be to, just obviously study and take that test. And so I just got the questions and started, going through the books and learning them that way. It was just a pretty typical way of getting my technician license. I tested for it, and then the first radio I got was just an HT FT60R, which I still have. And I spent a lot of time on FM, 2-meter FM. I didn't really get into HF for quite a while.
And now this message from Icom America. Now, after you've cleaned up your holiday decorations, admired the colorful socks and ties from your well-meaning significant others, it's time to get what you really wanted on your holiday wish list. Spice up your ham shack with Icom's new ID52A handheld radio, now shipping. This radio is perfect for staying in or venturing out and working your favorite VHF and UHF channels this winter season. The Icom ID52A is Icom's newest handheld amateur radio that is VHF and UHF dual band with D-Star and FM dual mode functions. This radio supports conventional FM communications and D-Star, simplex, repeater mode, regional, and worldwide calls over the D-Star Internet Gateway. The ID52A is the first handheld amateur radio with a full-color 2.3-inch waterfall display and the ability to send photos over D-Star with a connected Android device. Other features include wideband receiver with guaranteed range of 144 to 148 MHz and 440 to 450 MHz. It has VV, UU, VU with dual DV mode. Integrated GPS GLONASS receiver including grid square locations, micro SD card slot, micro USB for data transfer, programming, and charging, and it's IPX7 waterproof. Can you believe it? For more information, please click on the Icom banner ad in this week's show notes page at QSOtoday.com. So get that new radio that was missed on your list. And when you purchase your new Icom ID52A or any other amazing Icom radio or accessory, please tell the dealer that you heard about it here on QSO Today. And now back to our QSO. Well, I think you're in the Phoenix area. There is a lot of 2-meter repeaters, I think.
There are.
So there's a lot of opportunity to be on the air.
That's absolutely right. In fact, that's what I did a lot. I'd hit different repeaters and different nets, and really participated a lot in that area. And but then after a while, I decided maybe I should move on and try the HF stuff. So I think it was 2012 that I got licensed with K7HYK, and that was because I like hiking so much. So I got a vanity call sign K7HYK and got on the air. I think my first contact was with the Freewheelers net on 3.916, if I remember right, a guy named Pete. But early on, I did sideband, and I was really interested in digital, and that's kind of where my interest went. So probably, I don't know, 6-7 years of just doing 2 meters, and then after that, I started getting into digital and sideband.
It seems to me that a lot of technician class licensees who get their first radio and it's a 2-meter radio, you got a very nice radio. The FT60R is a nice radio, but many new licensees will get, say, a Baofeng radio or some inexpensive radio and try to operate on VHF and UHF. You seem to have a different experience, meaning that to do it for 5 or 6 years meant that it was actually pleasant for you and that you actually enjoyed it. Did you become part of a club, or did you become a regular user in one place, and how was that experience?
Well, let's see. So during that time where I was doing VHF and UHF, I was heavily involved in the Boy Scouts. And so for example, one thing in particular that I can think of is an event that we held every year called On Target. And what that event entailed was Boy Scout troops, probably on the order of 100 or more, would hike to the top of, or drive to the top of summits, and they would take 2x2 mirrors and either just do the one mirror or do an array of 4 or whatever, and use those mirrors to flash other summits and to kind of just see if we could get that flash and see who was on each summit and kind of throw a signal out at them. And that was all coordinated through the VHF ham radio. We had, in fact, I sent you a picture, I think, of one time we were on the hill and using the VHF. So we even stood up a net and tried to coordinate, making sure everybody had a chance to see how far they could reach those peaks with the reflection of the sun on the mirror.
And how did that event go?
Well, it was great because and the kids loved it because it was usually an overnighter. We usually spent the night on the hill, and then we did that on target event, and then afterwards we'd debrief or kind of have a this was by the end we'd do something around the campfire and talk about analogies and how it might apply to their lives. And so they were very successful, and almost always we'd get I think we had a list we prepared of certain peaks that were close enough to us that we could see the other troops flashes, and so we'd get that list and we'd go through and try to work each one of them, and usually we had about 8 or 10 at least different contacts with different summits.
Now, having the radios along with the activity, did any of the boys show interest in ham radio?
Well, they sure did, yeah. In fact, we encouraged them to use our call signs. It was me and another leader, and we tried to have them do as much of it as they could. And so, in fact, they did the coordinating on the radio. We with our call sign, and the other troops far off miles away, same thing. The leaders would put their kids on the radios and use the leader's call sign, and it was all youth led, and so it was great. Yeah.
Did any of those kids become ham radio operators?
Yes, a few of them did. Once they realized how much, they all go to school and stuff like that, so this is extra work. So, but yeah, I wouldn't say it was like overwhelming number of them, but a few did, yes.
Now, they may all have cell phones at this point, or even smartphones. How does ham radio compete with Boy Scouts who have smartphones? I mean, did you get a sense of their perception of what was different?
Well, actually, I used that as a way to gain interest. I organized campouts before on occasion with 6 to 8 different troops in a district camporee setting for the Boy Scouts, and we'd have different stations where we'd learn about radio. And one of the stations was just kind of talking about radio communication. And if I was presenting, I would always talk about how a cell phone is in essence like a ham radio, in that you use it to communicate to a cell tower, and then obviously that goes through the internet. But it operates the same. And as I tried to explain to them how a cell phone operates, then the light bulbs come on, and they're like, oh, okay, and they definitely gained interest when they could see that correlation.
Now, did you join any radio clubs at that time? And how important were radio clubs to your developing amateur radio interest?
I joined a radio club right when I got my technician license. It's Superstition Amateur Radio Club here in Arizona, and I've been a member of it ever since I started, ever since I got my technician license in 2005. And yeah, they played a big role in helping me along. I would say that my primary contribution to the club, other than being on the board a time or two, is that I am definitely a field day guy. It's how I got involved. And so I always help with the field day preparations and finding a location and helping with that aspect of the club. And they do other things as well, but that's where my primary focus has always been with that club.
And how elaborate is their field day operations?
I would say a little better than a lot. I mean, we have had on occasion 30, 40-foot towers up. We always have at least, we always have towers, it seems like, with HF, probably 4 stations running at the same time. We've done WinLink as one station and digital, and then we've done CW with another and sideband, and so we've tried to cover all the bands. We've even had guys out there doing satellite stuff. So I would say it's pretty elaborate.
How many members of the club?
I think the club, last I heard, we were hovering around 200. I think pretty big.
That's a good sized club, yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say active members that attend the meetings every month, I would say is close to 50 or 60. I think right around there.
Those are in-person meetings. Did you end up going to Zoom or something like that during the pandemic?
Yeah, we did. We went to the Zoom meetings for a while, and in fact, I think it's just been 2 or 3 months since we've been back to in-person meetings.
And are your in-person meetings now kind of hybrid? Do they include the people that would come on Zoom and not come in their car?
Yes, in fact, that is the case. We have people that call in through Zoom, and then we have the regular in-person thing. So it is a hybrid. Yes.
So how important was the Superstition Amateur Radio Club to maintaining your interest in ham radio? Because it seems to me that a guy that comes in with a technician class license, he's on 2 meters, maybe you need more in order to feel significant in the amateur radio community.
Yeah, well, eventually, I would attend these meetings and would learn. I had a long learning curve because even though I was in science and technology, the radio aspect of it, I really had a long way to go to learn everything. I was really starting from scratch. So I really appreciate the people who helped me out in the club and learn about the VHF side of things. But eventually, some of these presenters would come in and have some interesting things to talk about. And actually, Brian, W7JET, he's the one that got me involved in Summits on the Air, and that was through this club. He was a presenter for this club, and one meeting he was talking about Summits on the Air and how to get involved in that. And I had been thinking about how could I get involved, and sure enough, he pops up and gives the presentation, and then says, "Hey, if anybody's interested in coming, you can come with me, and we'll get you your first activation." And so I rose my hand and said, "Yeah, that'll be me. I want to come along."
Can you talk about that first trip out with Brian?
Yeah. So I don't think I even carried any gear with me, any radio gear, because at the time I didn't have any portable QRP gear. So Brian had everything in his pack and shared it. It was me and actually 2 other guys. I can't remember. One of them was, I actually can't remember the other. I don't think they're active at all anymore. So, but we went out to Mount Pelee. It was probably a hour drive to the top of the trailhead, and then it was another 2.5 mile hike to the top of Mount Pelee. And so we finally got up on there, and what was interesting is we got there. This is, out in the middle of nowhere. You drive a mile on a paved road, and then you drive another probably an hour on a paved road, and then another 8 miles on a dirt road, and then finally another 2.5 to the top of a peak that halfway up the peak has no trail. It's all just bushwhacking. But yet up on the top, there was this couple, and this guy proposed to his wife his soon-to-be wife up there. And it just blew me away out there where these people came from. It was funny, but, we took pictures of them and said congratulations. And then we set up Brian's antenna. I worked FM only, I think, if I remember right, with Brian's radio, and it was close enough to the valley that I was able to get plenty of contacts, and we all just kind of traded off working everybody, and it was really fun. I was hooked after that. I was like, I can do this.
What was the next step that you took in order to become a SOTA operator that could go out on your own and do activations?
Well, so I have already had a lot of background with backpacking and hiking, so that part was covered. I just needed radio, and so I got an FT817 shortly after that, and started. And then I was like wondering what I could do with an antenna, and Brian and some club members suggested that I just make one. And this is once again how the club has helped me out. And I had never made an antenna before, but they kind of guided me through and told me how to do it, and I did it, and it worked. So I went up on the hill with a 817 and a homebrew antenna and a fishing pole, a fiberglass fishing pole, and made some contacts. That was, I think, the first peak I did on my own was just a short one in town, just a 2-pointer, just a couple miles.
And what does that mean, a 2-pointer? Does that have something to do with the hike?
Well, it can. 2-pointers. There's a point system for summits on the air, and it's all based on elevation and prominence from another summit. And so the highest peaks get 10 points, and then the lowest peaks that are still eligible get 2 points. And it's every 2 points. So there's a 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 pointers, and there are some 1-pointers too. But it's all based on how prominent or how far up above other summits they are. It's just kind of all kind of a math thing, you know. And so it has nothing to do with how difficult the hike is, because there are some 2-pointers that are extremely difficult, and there are some 10-pointers that are drive ups. So you know, but it was something local in town. It was probably a couple mile round trip hike that on my first hike.
I want to take a minute to tell you about my favorite podcast, the Ham Radio Workbench podcast, with George, KJ6VU, and now joined by Rod, VA3ON, Mike, VA3MW, Mark, N6MTS, and Vince, VE6LK. Every 2 weeks, George and company offer up a status report on the many amateur radio projects on their workbenches and explore projects on their guests' workbenches. This group is project active and prolific, covering many technical areas of amateur radio. So the next time you want a deep dive into ham radio electronic project building, or to learn about technology, tools, test equipment, construction techniques, and the rest, listen to the Ham Radio Workbench podcast, available on every podcast player and channel. Use the link in this week's show notes page to get to the Ham Radio Workbench podcast directly. And now back to my QSO. As you've gotten better at doing SOTA activations, has the amount of gear or the kind of gear changed along the way?
It has in some regard, but not in others. I mean, I still use the FT817, but I had transitioned a little bit into some of the smaller radios, because about a year after I got involved in Summits on the Air, I realized that if I wanted to make contacts, I needed to do Morse code. And that's because that's where all the contacts were. I mean, sideband is much more difficult, QRP, and it seems like 80% or so of the people that were participating in Summits on the Air were doing Morse code. So I tried to pick up Morse code from scratch. I picked it up and started learning. And finally, about a year after I'd been participating, I did my first Morse code contact from the top of a summit. And I transited, and I just went from there. And so eventually, I wanted to get these. I could downsize these radios if I was, just a CW only. These radios are really small. You can get these Mountain Topper 3Bs for just the size of a deck of cards or something. So it's maybe a tenth the size of a FT817. I'm just guessing here, but really small. And so I held on to the 817 though, because I still wanted to do sideband, and it provided a number of other bands that you can use where these QRP smaller radios usually are just 3-banders or whatever. So yeah, I've expanded in that. I've tried different antennas, and I've tried different radios, and I've experimented, and I like to try new things when I get up on the summits, and not just use the same old radio and the same old antenna every time. And then in addition to that, I switch out the Morse code keys and try different keys as well. So
what radios have you tried out on SOTA? The Mountain Topper 3B you mentioned, the FT817. What other radios have you tried out there?
Well, I've even taken the 897 out, and I've taken the QCX Mini 20 meters, and I actually even took a Pixie, which is just a little, I don't know if you know what that is. It's just kind of a home. I made a few contacts on a Pixie.
You can find that on eBay, I think, for a few dollars.
Yeah, I think that when I bought it, it was like $3, but it might be $5 now or something. It's really inexpensive. And I had a homebrew Michigan Mighty Mite that I made a few contacts on as well. So a few purchased ones, a few kind of kits, and then just a one from just parts. And I've also used other people's radios, and then of course all the HTs that I have, the Bofang and the FT60R, and there's a Kenwood radio I have, so all kinds.
Do you take multiple radios out, or does it depend upon whether it's a 2-pointer or a 10-pointer, how much gear you take?
It definitely depends, not so much on the point system, but on how far the hike is. If I'm traveling any more than probably 3 miles, then I'll try to not take the FT817 or any type of sideband rig, and then try to lighten the weight and the load a little bit. Take the mountain topper. But if it's if I'm closer within 3 miles each way, then I'll probably take a little bit more gear. I do like to usually carry an FM radio as well as an HF radio, just in case one doesn't work, or if there's a problem with one, I can still have the other available to me. But like if I'm doing a 3-day backpacking trip, which I've done with my wife on occasion, I don't really take the big radios. It's just I try to downsize as much as possible.
Do you carry some kind of a Jarman GPS or some kind of satellite locator just in case you get stuck out in the boonies?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I do a lot of stuff on my own, but I also enjoy bringing people along. But in both cases, yeah, it's a Garmin a MAP 66i. It's a handheld one. It's not the mini I use, but it has the Iridium satellite communication that you can do if you get in trouble, and you can text people, which I do, and you can send little pins where you're located. I've done that for my wife on occasion, so let her know where I'm at if there's no cell service. But the great thing is that most places in Arizona have cell service. There's a few places that don't, but I would say only a handful of peaks that I've been on have not had cell service, which is kind of surprising, but it's truth.
How many peaks, SOTA eligible peaks, are there in Arizona?
There are over 4,000, a little bit over 4,000, and we've the group of SOTA guys here in Arizona have just kind of hit the tip of the iceberg on all those. There are so many that are undone. Some of them you can't do, even though they're there and on the maps, and you can see a pin where it looks like it's an opportunity to do a summit. It's on Native American land, and so those are off limits. And some of them in the Grand Canyon, the Park Service, they're unattainable. There's just no way you can get to them. So there'll be many that won't ever be activated, but there's still some that are not activated yet that somebody with a lot of stamina and some planning could probably do.
Now, I read that you're a SOTA mountain goat.
Yeah.
What is a SOTA mountain goat, and how did you become one of those?
So a SOTA mountain goat is an award given to somebody who has accumulated 1,000 points. And so I'm actually at 3,300 points roughly. So I've done it over and over a couple more times, but you accumulate the points up to 1,000, and once you reach that 1,000 points, and it usually takes a person anywhere from a year, if you're really pushing it, to a year and a half, maybe even 2 years to accomplish that if you're active.
And how do those points work? Meaning that do you get a few points? Is it based on the number of contacts that you've gotten? How does that work?
Oh, I see. Yeah, you need to have be on a summit that's eligible, and there are criteria for that, and you can go to the website to kind of see which ones are eligible and which ones aren't. And once you're on that summit, you have to make at least 4 contacts. And if you make those 4 contacts and log it, then you get the points that eligible peak is worth. And it relies a lot on a map, because there's a pin with the amount of points that a summit is worth if it's an eligible summit. A good website I like to go to kind of choose which peaks I'm going on and look at the points and stuff like that is called SOTLAS. It's SOTL.AS. And when you go there, I mean, there's pins for the whole world. And red represents 10 pointers, and 8 pointers are orange, and 6 pointers are yellow, and then you got 2 different variations of green for the 4 and 2 pointers. And so if you want to go do it, you've got to make sure you go to the one of those pins, and then you can accumulate the points based on how much that pin says it's worth.
When you set out to decide that you're going to capture a summit for SOTA, it seems to me that you might be actually close to other summits. Do you exercise some discipline and say, this trip is for one summit and then I'll make another trip for another summit? Or do you say, oh, you know what, there's 3 summits nearby, I could probably get them all in an afternoon? Do you have some strategy that you exercise before you go out to make summits?
Yeah, and it's a little bit of both. I would say that one of the rules is that you cannot do the same summit over again in the same year. So everything resets on January 1st. And so like right now, actually December, it's kind of tough to find a good peak to do because you've kind of done all the easy ones. And so oftentimes you have to drive further. And here in Phoenix, most of the summits are 2-pointers, and you really want to maximize the amount of points you can get a lot of times. So if you're chasing the mountain goat, for example, so you want to go to a place where there's more 10-pointers. And so from Phoenix to Flagstaff, where there's a lot of 10-pointers, is a 2.5 hour to 3 hour drive. So if you're going to do that, and I just did that on Monday with my wife. We just went up to Flagstaff. We left at 5 a.m. and got back at 7 p.m. You want to maximize, you're going to be up there anyway. You don't want to make multiple trips if you're going to be that far away. So we did 3 peaks that day, and it was a long day, but then there are other times, I'm closer to home and I'm like, you know what, I just want to relax and I just want to spend a lot of time on the hill, making a lot of contacts. And so I'll do that too. And I'll just sit up all day on one summit. I don't know. I don't know what the strategy is, other than it's just kind of the mood a lot of times.
Well, I think, most of us, maybe because we didn't grow up in Arizona, we think of Arizona as Phoenix. So we think of like hot desert. But it seems like probably over half the state is mountain ranges. When you're deciding what your SOTA activations will be for maybe 2022, do you have a sense of which direction you're going to go and which hilltops you're going to go after? Do you plan that kind of stuff in advance?
Yeah, I do, but I know that a lot of people don't. But I would say that I think this is true for most people as they go along. When you are trying to get that first 1,000 points or that mountain goat, the first one, you're all about maximizing summits. And so you're looking for all the 10-pointers, and you're looking for, you don't want to, if you can get easy ones, then you can get more in. So you're just kind of looking for the easy 10-pointers. But then after that goal is met, then now you're going to look for a different goal. And so my goals right now are really doing summits that I've never done before, unique summits. And so almost every time I go out on my own to do a summit, I'll look and see if there's a summit that's around that I have not done yet, and try to plan around that. So it's different for different people and different stages of where you're at in the program.
If you're working a summit on your own because you're taking maybe a couple of day hike by yourself, what are the most important things to plan for a solo hike for a couple of days?
It depends on where you're going to, of course. And if it's summer in Arizona, it's a lot different than if it's summer in Flagstaff. But I would say the most important thing is you've got to make sure everybody knows, or at least a person knows, where you're going and has a itinerary of your plan. And so you would need to map out where you plan on going and make sure that you let somebody know that, because if not, that's you could really find yourself in some trouble. Make sure you have enough water is another thing. And, these are all hiking and backpacking things that are, most people know. You should, take the 10 essentials, flashlight and clothing and food and those types of things, no matter whenever you go out. And then, after that, you just kind of plan around when you're going to be on the summit and let people know when you're going to be on and have fun out there.
I think one of the problems that many of us have that have probably spent too much time watching television is we think of strangers on the trail. We go back to that Burt Reynolds movie in the 70s where we think that strangers on the trail are potentially dangerous. How do you mitigate danger with strangers on the trail?
Well, I don't know that I do a whole lot. I don't. I know some people have weapons of sorts, but I don't do that. I've not really encountered a lot of people on summits or out there. Some of the trails are heavily trafficked, and in those cases, it's pretty it's not that concerning. And then a good majority of the time, there is no trail, and so you're out someplace where nobody really would be. I'd say, like I said before, most of the peaks don't have trails to the top of them here in Arizona, especially. And so I don't encounter people a whole lot out there. But so I haven't really taken any steps for mitigation on that regard, as far as I can think.
How about wild animals?
And the same thing. I not that worried here in Arizona about any wild animals. I think that they're more afraid of us than we are of them for the most part. I know that there are mountain lions out there and there's bears and stuff, but I don't think they really are a threat to us. I think they just kind of try to stay to themselves.
And do you find that forest management, forest rangers and stuff are pretty open to people hiking off the trail to get to the summit?
Yes, here in Arizona, that's the case. It's if it's in the forest and you can access the forest legally, then you have free reign to go roam wherever you want, for sure.
We will return to our guests in just a moment. A new way to show your support of the QSO Today podcast is to buy me a coffee. I consume gallons of coffee to create this weekly podcast. Invite me for coffee by pushing the yellow button, Buy Me a Coffee, on the QSO Today show notes page. And now back to our QSO Today. What is Red Summit RF?
Oh, yeah, that's my YouTube channel. Red Summit RF is my way of giving back to the community a little bit. I started a while ago doing these summits, and I just have seen so many beautiful places in the scenery. And I also thought to myself on occasion, I'd like to see what this summit looks like before I try to tackle it and have some information and intelligence about it. And so I thought, you know what, I'll go out and look. And there wasn't a whole lot out there. There was a few people out there. I think KG6HQD was out there with something, but not a lot. And so I decided to create a YouTube channel and document my Summits on the Air adventures, and to show people not only the beauty of hiking and to get in and getting on tops of summits and enjoying the outdoors, but also just the ham radio gear that I use and just different things ideas that I have about how to set up a portable station. Just, it's just a myriad of different things. And then in addition to that, I have guests on who talk about portable radio. The whole channel is about portable radio and how to do that. And I just try to encourage more people to get out there and do portable radio.
Now, do you do portable radio in the snow during the winter? And how do you power the devices that you're taking?
I absolutely do activations in the snow. And in fact, that's my favorite time. You get an extra 3 points if you do winter activations for some summits. And those they're usually the ones that are higher elevation and have snow on them. So yeah, I do that. I usually take a tarp with me in the winter, and I just lay the tarp out on the top of the snow, or if there's rocks that have kind of available, I'll set them out, set my gear on that. But I always power my gear with just the Bioenno. I got a 4.5 amp hour battery, a Bioenno battery, and it's an external battery to the FT817, and I have a LiPo battery for the. It's a 0.5 milliamp or 0.5 amp hour battery for the Mountain Typer. So it's just rechargeable LiPo or LiPo batteries is usually what I use to power things.
And do you use any solar chargers or anything like that? If you're out of juice, you're out of juice.
Yeah, I find it really interesting, the solar aspect, but I don't find it what's the word, practical for SOTA. And because, you're hiking to the top of the summit, you're spending maybe an hour up there, then you're hiking back down and on to the next thing. Maybe you'll spend 3 or 4 hours up there, but still, I'm always prepared with the power that I need. I don't need to recharge ever. I mean, the only time would be maybe backpacking, and I haven't really even then had the need. So while I enjoy it, I do have some solar panels, and I think it's very interesting. I don't think it's practical for SOTA.
But if you're out for a few days, you take enough battery to handle all of your operating.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
What is Mini Morning Madness?
So Mini Morning Madness is a really fun thing that we put together here in Arizona for Summits on the Air. And what it is it's a daytime, or it's an early morning activity for Summits on the Air, where multiple people will get on a summit simultaneously, just locally here in Phoenix. There's a lot of short hikes, a mile or two hikes to the top of eligible summits. And so we've had upwards of 10 to 15 people who were simultaneously on top of a summit at the same time. We get up in the morning about 5 a.m. Or even earlier sometimes, so that we can get to the top of the mountain at sunrise in the summer, and then make our contacts and make summit to summit contacts with the hand, whoever else is on summit. And then we go back down, get in our car, and make it home and shower and get on to work. So it's a pre-work activity that's just good for exercise and just a fun time.
And the frequency of that is you do that every week?
Yeah, in the summer we do that every week. So it lasts 12 weeks, and every Wednesday usually or a Thursday we'll choose a different peak, and everybody's on a different peak, but we'll choose a different day and do that. Yeah, it's 2 meters. We use mostly. We don't. Some people take HF if they want to stay up there a little longer, but in the summer it gets really hot, and so that's why we do it in the morning so early before work, is because the sun is still not coming up yet, and it's but when we're hitting the trail coming back down, it's usually in the 90s, and then it heats up from there. So and we've done some 23 centimeters, some microwave summit to summit contacts, as we take all three up there, the 440, the 2 meters, and the 23 centimeters.
So that's a portable radio. I think you mentioned it to me, right? It's an Alinco portable.
Yes, it's a Alinco NJ7V. It has 2 meters, 440, and 23 centimeters. It's a tri-bander.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay, so you could say you're doing microwave contacts from these hilltops.
Yes. Yep, indeed.
Is there some kind of an award or participatory ribbon that's given for the mini Morning Madness guys and gals, perhaps?
No, I mean, there are gals, yeah. I would say no. I don't think we've really done anything. It's just an enjoyable time, and we don't really. It's an idea, though. We ought to maybe think about something like that. But no, we get up there, we enjoy each other's company, and make 15, 20 contacts. Half of those are summit to summits, and then call it good and collect our 5 points and go home.
Now, when we were talking before we started pushing the record button, you had mentioned that you have an involvement with the local community college. What kind of involvement is that? When
I got involved and got my technician license, I realized that I really didn't know how the radio worked. And so I felt like I needed to take some college courses on electronics and kind of figure that out. And so I started, I have a full-time job. I did then too. So I was just taking one class a semester at Mesa Community College. But I started taking classes there, and I noticed that at one time there was a ham radio club that was through the electronics program that I was a part of. And so I reached out to the program director for the Mesa Community College electronics program, and I asked if I could help with the club. And he said it's been kind of disbanded because we don't have anybody that can lead it. And he said, "Do you want to be president?" And I said, "Well, I suppose I could." And so he said, "Well, why don't we just have an election, and you can see if your peers will vote you in, and you can get a secretary and a vice president and make it all official." So we went through that process. We got the club going, and it was just great. So I had electronics classes, and then in addition to that, on the off time, I was bringing speakers in and demonstrators to talk about various aspects of radio. Had a guy come in and actually do a satellite communication. We had a guy come in and after we had built tape measure Yagis, he came in and talked about fox hunting, and then we did a fox hunt the following Saturday. Just a great time, a lot of fun.
It's now an active club as a result of your interest. And how many members do you think it has?
Well, when I was there doing it, it was it's not active now because I left I finished school, and unfortunately, what happens when there's a leadership vacuum, a lot of times nobody will fill it, and so it's kind of back to where it was. But during the time when I was leading the club, there were about 10 to 15 people at the high point.
So there are hams floating around the community college there in Arizona.
Well, you know what? It's interesting that most of the members of that club were not members. We had a few, But we had a lot of people that became hams after joining the club and going through some of the, we actually had some lessons on how to get your technician license and stuff like that. And several people got their licenses. They were from the math department. They were from the science department, the music department. They'd come in, have an interest, and then they would end up getting their license.
Do you have a favorite amateur radio podcast? You don't have to say this one.
Yeah, it's this one.
Are there other podcasts that you listen to?
I listen to the Ham Radio Workbench, and I listen to, that's probably these two are honestly, this one and the Ham Radio Workbench are probably two podcasts for ham radio that I listen to. And I have some other ones that are not ham radio related. Yeah.
What can George and I do for hams that are new to ham radio? Is there anything that we should talk about that we don't talk about?
Let me just back up real quick and say, how could I forget the Solder Smoke podcast? I listened to that. I've listened to that a long time too.
Also one of my favorites.
Yes. What could you guys do to help new hams? Is that what the question was?
I occasionally get an email from a new ham that'll say that a lot of the stuff that we talk about, if we start talking ham radio, is Greek. It's a new language. They're not used to hearing it. There's a lot of stuff they don't know yet. I kind of think about, as a young ham myself, I learned ham radio just by listening on the 2-meter and 440 channels in Los Angeles hours at a time while I was trying to work on something else. So I'm just wondering whether or not a new ham, from the conversations that we have in our podcast, whether those conversations actually help people learn about the hobby or give them more vocabulary.
Well, the way I look at it is this. I listen to podcasts like the Solder Smoke podcast sometimes, and I have no idea what they're talking about. Same with the Workbench. Sometimes I don't know, but you got to start somewhere. And so I continue to listen to those, and if I have a question, I look it up or I try to learn it. And it's even now Greek to me. But I would say, I always tell people, especially people who are new to the hobby, there's a couple of things that I tell them. One is that you really need to have somebody, if you can, that helps you along, a mentor of some sort, an Elmer. And it doesn't have to be somebody that you see all the time, but you, like, for example, especially when it comes with Summits on the Air, I offer to take people out and to go do their first and maybe even second summit, show them how I do things, and then let them take it from there. I think it's important that you have somebody that can really explain on your level the things that you need to know. And I think another thing I'd say is not get too discouraged, because I think a lot of people try to get ahead of themselves a little bit and want to drink from a fire hose, so to speak. They want to take it all in, and they're so excited about the hobby. But if you just take it in small steps, I think it's better.
Because of your interest in SOTA and the fact that there's enough people to do the mini morning madness during the summer, do you guys get together as a sub club to talk about gear, to exchange gear, perhaps try different things? Have you done that? Yes,
just recently, actually. We have a quarterly meeting now, and the name of the meeting is called GOATS. It's GOTES, Gathering on the East Side. It's just an open meeting once a quarter. Whoever wants to come and talk about Summits on the Air can come. Whoever doesn't have to. It's just we usually get, 8-10 people that show up at a local barbecue place and have a good time. Yeah.
What do you think the greatest challenge facing amateur radio is now, from your perspective?
Well, when I think of amateur radio, I think of community and social interactions. And I think that the biggest challenge facing us is, in that context, is actually rising above the negativity amongst ourselves that's out there. This isn't just a challenge facing like the ham radio community. I know that. But I think negativity can really destroy us. And I think that there are a lot of examples out there of purposely putting people down and trying to bring people down, name calling and jamming and arrogance. And I really think that this is probably the biggest challenge of our day. In my mind, I think that it could hurt the hobby more than anything.
I think you're right. I don't hear it here because I'm kind of, in my little isolated corner of the world. But I certainly can, if I'm listening to an SDR radio, if something's happening in the major cities, like in Los Angeles, if you listen on the repeaters there, you can hear stuff I heard 40 years ago, but it seems like there might be a lot more of it. Yeah, that's one of the things I think I agree with you, that we seem to have shorter fuses these days and use social media, and maybe you can even call ham radio the very first social media. We kind of use these platforms to vent.
Yeah, in fact, I was just going to mention, I'm a part of a group, a collaboration of YouTubers, and so we are very much receiving comments all the time through the YouTube channel as well as other social media, and we really do see a lot of negativity come in. I mean, I have to be fair and say there's a lot of really positive people out there that really are encouraging, but we have to deal with this, and it's just something that I don't feel like a lot of the guys that are with me, we just don't feel like it's something that is conducive to promoting the hobby.
Well, one of the nice things about ham radio is that we have ham radio as something in common to talk about that doesn't seem to bruise too many egos, I don't think. What excites you the most about what's happening in ham radio now?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think, again, I'll just go back to the social media thing, because they're and the YouTube channels like Jason KC5HWB on Ham Radio 2.0 and Steve KM9G and Adam K6RK. These guys were my mentors in YouTube, and I think that we're seeing a lot of good information out there. It's becoming more available on the internet and on social media and on blogs, and even the online meetings that we get with teams. I think that this is just a kind of a new opportunity for ham radio to get more information out there, and I really like that. I think it's exciting, and I think it's helping the hobby, the social media, just the internet aspect of it. And I think another thing that excites me is Morse code. I mean, they took away the requirement for Morse code, but I mean, I love Morse code, and you would not be. I mean, it's just amazing the number of people who are wanting to learn Morse code. I think it's an exciting thing.
I think it's amazing as well. I took the CW Academy, or one of the CW Academy classes earlier this year, and was really glad I did, because it really kind of broke some very bad habits that I had learned over the last 47 years.
I agree. I've taken some just recently. Last semester, I took a CW Ops class. I love it. I do their Wednesday CWT, their little skid challenge or whatever it is, and I enjoy that. So they go fast, man, I tell you.
What advice would you give to new returning hams? You gave some a little bit just a few minutes ago, but if you were going to wrap it up, what is the advice that you'd give to new returning hams?
Well, so my wife is a new ham, and she has really helped me become aware of some of the challenges that, having been in the hobby for a while, I kind of overlook. And I would say that it's kind of hard for new hams to break social circles, to break into social circles, and to learn the terminology and the technology. They find it intimidating, like you mentioned. And it's just a different culture out there. So, and it can be expensive. So I would say, though, just surround yourself with helpful people, with positive people, with people that you feel know more than you, because it's bound to brush off, and the more you can open up to relationships, which this is what ham radio is all about, relationships, and finding those positive people to influence you. I think that's the main thing, and just don't get discouraged, if things don't go your way.
Well, I think that's wonderful advice. Charlie, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the QSO Today podcast. This is really fun. I think the listeners probably will sense that I'm kind of treating you like a new ham in order to kind of discover or uncover, or maybe get some secrets of what it's like to be a new ham these days, and what we can do as more experienced or more seasoned hams to make ham radio more welcoming to people who are new hams. So I hope that is what we did, and I really appreciate your coming on the QSO Today podcast.
You bet, Eric. Thank you so much for having me.
73.
That
concludes this episode of QSO Today. I hope that you enjoyed this QSO with Charlie. Please be sure to check out the show notes that include links and information about the topics that we discussed. Go to www.qsotoday.com and put in NJ7V in the search box at the top of the page. Be sure to click on the Expo menu item at the top of the page for updates on the upcoming QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo coming March 12th, 2022. I'm updating it as I have more information. My thanks to Icom America for its support of the QSO Today podcast. Please show your support of Icom America by clicking on their banner in the show notes pages. You may notice that some of the episodes are transcribed into written text. If you'd like to sponsor this or any other episode into written text, please contact me. Support the QSO Today podcast by first joining the QSO Today email list by pressing the subscribe buttons on the show notes pages. I will not spam you or share your email address with anyone. Become a listener sponsor monthly or annually by clicking on the sponsor buttons on the show notes pages, or use my Amazon link before shopping at Amazon. Amazon gives me a small commission on your purchases while at the same time protecting your privacy. I'm grateful for any way that you show appreciation and support. It makes a big difference as I head towards episode 400. QSO Today is now available in the iHeart Radio, Spotify, YouTube, and a bunch of other online audio services, including the iTunes Store. Look on the right side of the show notes pages for a listing of these services. You can use the Amazon Echo and say, "Alicia, play the QSO Today podcast from TuneIn." My thanks to Ben Bresky, who edits every single show and allows both this host and my guest to sound brilliant. Thanks, Ben. Until next time, this is Eric, 4Z1UG, 73. The QSO Today podcast is a product of KEG Media Inc., who is solely responsible for its content.